Ladies and gents, welcome to CG Reaction. This is What If Germany Won World War One, Part 2 by the channel AlternateHistoryHub. Yeah, I reacted to Part 1 2 days ago, I think. It was a fun video, a fun exercise. Like, what if Germany won the World War One? Obviously, the Hitler wouldn't have rise up like that. I guess monarchies wouldn't have fall down like it did, because in World War One, Austria and Germany both lost. Monarchies fell down because of it. Ottoman Empire's monarchy fell down, and that just created this kind of domino effect, which I guess made the entire world's all the monarchies and kings and whatever, just if they are there, I guess they are just for the show purposes, not actually functioning monarchies or something like that. Democracy and I guess communism rules, I guess. So yeah, monarchies was done after World War, and because of it, if Germany won, that's not the case. Obviously democracy is there, but monarchy is also there side by side. Right now we think monarchies as thing of past and democracy rules entire world right now. I guess it would be 50-50 if Germany had won World War One. Ottoman Empire, I think, would still survive. If it doesn't, I think there will be a different version of Ottoman Empire, not the one we have right now, where Ottoman Empire got broken down like it did. So yeah, if anything, it would have been consumed by some countries here and there, or maybe it would have been, I guess, transformed into something else entirely. But it wouldn't have broken apart like it did after World War One and created all these Middle East issues. So I guess that would have been something. And yeah, Germany would have been powerhouse of the 20th century. Not USA. USA would still be, I guess, there, economically powerful, but not as powerful as it today, because World War One, World War Two gave USA a lot of, I guess, currency of smart people and everything to be what they are right now. Lots of German engineers, scientists wouldn't have fled to US. They would still be in Germany. I don't know. Germany was a powerhouse, scientific and everything before World Wars. I think it would be a powerhouse later on too. So yeah. The Great War is over. After brutal years of fighting, the German Empire and the Central Powers stood victorious over the defeated Allies. At least in this alternate world, what if Germany had won the war? How would this have changed the society in 20th century? Yeah, it's gonna be a fun video. Remember, people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cast with the different playlists like history with all my historical videos like this. Ole Sakashi Proxon, Internet Historian, CGP Grey, Tier Zoo. And yeah, let's watch this one. Sieg für Deutschland.
In this alternate timeline, the German Empire, along with the Central Powers, won the Great War in a stunning victory against the Allies. It was not an easy victory, and it was not a quick one, but it was one which redefined the history of the modern world. Conflict has a way of reorganizing the stage along your own terms. This was seen in our timeline when the Allies forever neutered the Germans and Austrians from European politics. The reparations shrunk Germany's economy and territory, making it already fragile once the Depression hit, and the war saw the death of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. By now, you probably know the ramifications of this. It was this initial defeat that immediately stopped the Germans' rise to power that had been occurring for the last half-century. A united Germany under Prussian rule was a formidable force. It wasn't a colonial power like Britain, France, or Russia, but it was still one with growing potential. When the Great War ended and the Kaiser fled, this
yeah, it didn't have the Empire of Britain, sure, but reacting to Bismarck video from Extra Credits, I realized that Prussia that became Germany later on with combining some other countries too, but center is Prussia basically. So Prussia, there's that saying that every state has a military, while Prussian military has a state, which means they're militarized people. I guess that makes me wonder here, like, what Hitler was doing, I guess, from his perspective, was also economic thing, because if you have a military state where military is your main thing, where most people are conscript or something like that, at that time, if you just basically take over places one after another, that's also your economical thing that drives your country, I guess. Wars feeds your country or something like that. Maybe that's what Hitler saw that, because in the end, in World War II, Hitler was all in, He did certain things here and there that he just put all in, like he had to win World War II, otherwise Germany screwed or something like that. I don't remember the details, but there was something like that. Like he made some treaties or made some deals or something here and there before starting the World War II, that he was all in inside of that, because he didn't see the world where he lost, I guess. He was so sure that he's going to win or something like that. So, he was running out of resources by the end, but he was still determined, because he probably thought that he's going to win a country here and there and take resources from there and continue on, take countries over countries over countries, and drive economy of Germany and feed the German empire like that, because Prussia and Germany is such a, military state. So, yeah, if Germany had won World War One, would they have been an engineering powerhouse that they are today, like with all the vehicles and things, like German engineering? Only reason German engineering became that because after World War One and World War Two, Germany was, I guess, neutered, like he said in the video. So they had to innovate, just like Japan did. Japan also had to innovate in a way to stay afloat, because military was just gone. So they became all this engineering powerhouse. So would they have been that? I mean, I'm pretty sure they would have been scientific powerhouse, because they were already that. Germany was kind of a scientific powerhouse before world wars. All the scientists and everything there, Albert Einstein and everything. So I don't know, would have they been engineering powerhouse like they are today? It's really hard to speculate, but I don't know. I don't see the engineering aspect of Germany would have been same that is right now. I think more of a scientific way they would have been advanced, and also war way, because war wouldn't have stopped. They would have still tried to take a bit of Ottoman Empire here and there, take lands here and there. I don't know.
The rise was finished. Germany went down the path of Nazism, which would only destroy it further, and led it into being split between two states for 5 decades until the 1990s. This was 80 years of being mostly subjected to foreign powers. Today, just 2 decades later, Germany is once again the economic power of Europe through a democracy. But it's not difficult to see that
democracy and innovation, because they were neutral military way. They couldn't fight wars, fight over territories and shit, because they, everybody's just like, no, bad Germany, shut up. So they had to innovate and become engineering powerhouse.
Unified Germany probably would have gone down a different path in those lost years. This is part 2. When we left off, the Central Powers are victorious against the Allies. The Russians have been driven to civil war, and due to the territory acquired in the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, which doesn't completely collapse, Germany now is left with a sizable portion of Eastern Europe. You may have flashbacks to World War II, but keep in mind it's not like the Third Reich style conquering the East for Lebensraum. As per the treaty agreement, the Russians allow for the birth of new nations in the Baltics and an independent Ukraine, as well as the creation of the Cossack and Crimean states as well. The Germans begin the redrawing of the map. While these Baltic and Ukrainian states are technically independent, they are loyal to the German economy and the financial system, almost like another entity we all know and love. But these states, all in all, are German puppets, with the German minority in each state being the highest class, including the rulers. This is Prussians after all. Poland never really is discussed, so their future is muddled, and probably violent. Speaking of which, the Russian Civil War is still, of course, happening, and plans get muddled in war. It's easily foreseeable the conflict in Russia blends into the plans with the Germans as the conflict spills over. Communists versus non-communists fighting in many areas of Eastern Europe. The stability of Russia is of the utmost importance to the Germans, as a Soviet state on their border is a catastrophe to the traditionalist Prussian culture. The White Army receives vast amounts of funding, support, and men to the front lines from almost every Western state, from Britain, France, Germany, and America. With this aid from the powerful German from Britain, France, Germany, and America.
Okay, I get it for the idea's sake, but would Britain, France support Germany like that just after the World War One, and after losing like that? US might be neutral, so they might support, sure, because they would oppose Soviet Union and idea of socialism. But yeah, I don't know about this.
With this aid from the powerful German Empire, the Whites succeed, and the Soviets are crushed. The Soviet Union never arises.
Okay, I think that's a bit strong here. I don't know. Obviously, it's hard to speculate, so he's just taking some liberties here and there. But I think this is a bit strong. Soviet Union, the idea of Soviet Union would not have been just like gone like that, especially after Germany won and Russia had to give up all those places. I think the people will be pissed in Russia. If anything, even if they get crushed because of all the support the White Army got, I think the idea of Soviet Union would still be there, would rise up again here and there through guerrilla warfare here and there, and maybe in the future would rise again. I don't know. I don't think Soviet Union as a socialist utopia, the idea of that would just go away like that. So I don't know about that.
Which, if you want the full scenario on that, check out this video. Germany, while the dominant army on the continent, was just that, on the continent. It was always limited by the superior British Navy and, compared to others, always had a lackluster number of overseas colonies. Going into the war, Germany always had the ambition of stripping much of these colonies from their enemies. Had they won, nothing would have stopped this exchange. In this alternate timeline, what we see is something called Mittel Africa, or Middle Africa. The German Empire seizes British, French, and Belgian territory all throughout Africa, effectively taking over most of the continent. It was basically connecting the three existing German colonies, allowing for one large swath of land across the African equatorial jungle and savanna. A direct empire across much of Africa and an economic dominant force in Eastern Europe is always a possibility. Rebellions would be put down hard. The likelihood of Germany's success.
Oh shit. This is scary scenario. Germany having that Middle Africa portion for themselves. Obviously they won, so they would sign lots of treaty that's beneficial to them. They would become a real powerhouse like US is today. But there would be more monarchy, that kind of powerhouse. And that has effect throughout the globe. That affects lots of things. They will get involved in a lot of things. They would take on places and spread their ideas. So would the free world that we think of today, democratic free world where most countries are democratic today, would that be the case? I mean, obviously lots of countries would be democratic, but how free and democratic would they be? Would they be just pretend democracy or a true democracy? I don't know. I don't know what this would have effect over the entire world and other countries' politics too, but yeah.
Succeeding at such a huge endeavor across so much land is hard to say, as the Germans lost against South Africa in our timeline. The Great War is over, and to the victor goes the peace. But the peace is only won if the victor is competent, which leads us to discuss the black sheep of the bunch, the Kaiser, Wilhelm II. During the war, he was mostly a figurehead. But when he made decisions, they were usually based on emotion and harmed Germany in the process.
No shit. I mean, okay, this might be a out there thing, but imagine if Bismarck was alive and he was leading, Germany at the time. If anything, that strengthens the idea that if Germany wins World War One or not, if there's a chance that Germany would win World War One if Bismarck is there because he was that kind of smart. But imagine after winning and Bismarck is still in power somewhat. Bismarck is still making decisions. I mean, that would be a scary scenario, right? Bismarck is already, leaning towards more monarchy type of thing rather than democracy. Yeah.
For Germany to have a successful peace, it would need to figure out the exact role the monarchy would play in this new Germany. The war showed that the Kaiser didn't need full authority, as his generals ran the country effectively by themselves. So the traditional role of the Kaiser wasn't entirely needed, even if Germany won. It's possible, due to Wilhelm's general incompetence, the German government would slowly begin shifting his power away from the monarchy and into the hands of the military or government. This isn't to say a democracy, but it's a step away from an absolutist monarch. In the West, there isn't so much a cultural change. but a shift in its potential. In our time,
Yeah, about Kaiser thing, obviously, one person having power, I don't think that would have lasted in any scenario. I think there would be more of a government that makes decision. I don't know, like how China is today. Does that make it communism or not? I don't know. But how China is today, president for life, there are certain people in government who makes all the decisions, something like that. I think that would have been the case. Maybe government is made of all the noble people or prince or kings or whatever, who the hell knows. But something like that. I don't think one person making the decision or one person being the powerhouse would have stayed for long.
timeline, we went down one path, led by Britain, America, and France. In this timeline, that culture is Germanized. As I said in the last part, without the defeat of Germany being a nail in the coffin to prominent monarchies on our timeline, the legacy of monarchs and empires is less black and white. Monarchies prove they can still be semi-relevant in the 20th century. The main change here is Germany's legacy in the world. Before the war, Berlin was one of the main centers of finance, education, and art in the entire Western world. After the war, the legacy of Germany was a nation surrounded, and after Hitler, a nation which was too dangerous to be allowed to continue. But in this alternate timeline, that legacy never exists. With new victories in the East and harsh treaties against the British and French, the Germans set themselves up to be economic masters of this new order. Just as the United States used World War II and the economic boom to spread its own culture across the world, so too does Germany. When you have a victor, though, there are...
Hold up there. US culture spread around because of, I don't know, things like Hollywood and things. That's what spread around the culture. German Hollywood, I don't know why, but I don't see that. And even if World War One, Germany won World War One, that would have made them economic powerhouse and probably the number one country in the world. I don't think US would be so behind because they were neutral during the World War One. They would never have joined the World War One, so no World War Two either. So I think they would have still do all the trading and things with Germany. They would be powerhouse because economically they were already powerful enough even before World War One. So I guess they would have just strengthened on that, and their idea of democracy and free thinking in the US would have attracted some artists and there's some people as well, because monarchies is constraining, I guess. Some people need free thinking, free mind. Some art need free mind. So people would have been attracted to US anyway because of the democracy and free being free world. So I think art in Hollywood and everything would have still be US's thing, and all the culture that we know of gets dominated because of that being free, and all the art and Hollywood and everything getting attracted there. So it still would be US thing. But Germany, we would think Germany as being the biggest power of them all. Lots of things would be, in the world, German, like how we think of US today in the economic and power stance, we would think of Germany as that. But as culturally, I think US would still dominate because of being the free democratic country. And economically, they would not be that far behind Germany.
There are certainly losers. The defeat at the hand of the Central Powers affects every Allied nation differently following the signing of the Treaty of Paris and Treaty of London. Britain, while bitter, would be quick to adapt commercial ties with the Germans. Tensions still exist, however, due to Germany's new influence in Belgium. The British Empire is diminished in Africa as the Germans take all of Middle Africa. Among imperialists, this is incredibly horrendous. The French as well aren't so forgiving. They would have lost 2 wars by then with the Germans, and a national call for revenge is...
So if World War One Germany wins and Britain loses, so what does that... Would Germany take India from Britain? Would that work? Or maybe even if Britain lost, places like India, the presence of British people here and the army of India, maybe they would not come to some agreement, I don't know. Would India go in the hands of Germany? And if so, what does that mean for the India's, I don't know, man. I don't know how the India's freedom would have gone. Would India be free? I guess the same thing that, all say Gandhi and everybody, the same thing that did with the British, they would have done with the Germans. So India would have still become free, I guess, around the same time. But I guess World War II helped in that goal of India becoming free too. Without World War II, would all the guerrilla warfare and a thing happen in the India, Gandhi and everything, would have worked? Or would Germany would have just crushed all those rebellions and India would still be under Germany? I don't know. This alternate timeline breaks into so many branches, it's hard to think, man.
Prominent. It's likely the Treaty of Paris is harsh, just as Brest-Litovsk was against the Russians, and new reparations are forced upon the French this time too. Now, if this seems like just a switch of what happened against Germany in our timeline, it's not. After the loss against the Prussians in the Franco-Prussian War in our own timeline, the French were enraged, and mass anarchy and instability reigned. The Paris Commune was one such event where radical socialist troops took over the city for months. France was subject to disaster if it lost another war, which in this scenario, it does.
Yeah.
It's likely nationalism and socialism rise in the country as it faces what to do against its enemy to the east. No matter what, this bad blood between the two nations doesn't go away, and most likely results in another war. Britain and France would become incredibly bitter after this loss. Speaking of allies, I never discussed Germany's.
Yeah, so obviously, when Germany lost, Germany, like I said, Prussia was already militarized type of state. So was Germany, because after World War One, that made it easier for it to rise again, since it was that kind of military type state, and Hitler was at the center of it. France, in the other hand, is not militarized state like that. So when Germany, being the superpower and being badass military-wise that it was, obviously if France tried to rise again, it would have been crushed. It would not be like French version of Nazi or French version of Hitler. It wouldn't have happened like that. So yeah, France would rise up against Britain too. They would get crushed again. And I guess how it used to happen before World War One, wars and wars. I think every few decades we would see wars between countries, I guess. But I'm pretty sure, atomic bombs would get developed, because you can't stop science. You can't stop innovation. Somebody would have been like, oh, I have no political affiliation to anything. I don't think politically. I just care about science, and I just want to see if I can make this atomic bomb or not. Somebody would have created that, So yeah.
Austria-Hungary and the Ottomans. Both countries themselves were the sick men of Europe, and it's unlikely they'd survive much longer throughout the 20th century. Yet, we don't care about that. What was most important was how they died. Demographics are a main issue in the area of Ottoman control. The Great War and the decade following saw an incredible population shift in Anatolia. Following the war and the collapse of the empire, the chaos which followed saw a population exchange between the Greeks and Turks. In this alternate timeline, the Armenian genocide still occurs. There is deportation, murder, and genocide on a large amount of the population. The Ottoman Empire, a victor in the war, doesn't collapse, at least not yet, and so the Christian minority stays within the region well into the 20th century. Yet, there is still ethnic tension within the empire as its grip weakens. If the empire does collapse, history of ethnic civil war probably stays as it was in our timeline. That's just how it is. As for the Arabs to the south,
man, I don't know about that. I think, all the Middle East issues rose up because how the countries were cut off by Britain and France. That's because after World War One, suddenly Ottoman Empire fell. If it's sudden like that, and you cut up countries, that would happen. If Ottoman Empire slowly dies, I think it would, become some other entity, like some different countries or something, or people slowly take pieces of your country and make their country, and suppresses any rebellion or anything like that. There won't be cutting into many countries once, like it happened after World War One. One Ottoman Empire fell and it became many countries. I don't think it would have happened like that. Maybe it would have been changed to some other entity that is a country now. slowly change to that. Or maybe, people start to take pieces from Ottoman Empire like they used to, and make their own, expand their own country slowly, like how it happened with Poland, where Poland gets sucked in by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. I think that would have been the same fate of Ottoman Empire. Every countries would have slowly take over Ottoman Empire and make into their own country. So I don't think there would have been new countries, multiple countries would have been founded like it did and cause all this tension. Either they would have become part of some other country where any rebellion happens, they would have suppressed it, or it would have become one different type of country than Ottoman Empire, just a bit smaller because somebody would have consumed some part of it. So it wouldn't have, even if that is tension, it would have been like what it is today, I think. Only reason today's tension are there is like sudden breakup of Ottoman Empire and creating multiple countries without thinking where ethnic people are and where should I draw the borders.
South, the Middle East isn't simply divided into artificial states like Iraq or Syria after the war. When the Ottomans do collapse, the Arabs unite under larger, more natural states.
I was just saying
Iraq
that.
is non-existent, and instead is divided between Shia and Sunni Arabs. The Kurds have their own nation as well. Wars between the groups still happen, but destabilization between groups into civil war, like in our timeline, rarely are such an occurrence. Israel simply doesn't exist in this timeline. But there is a much larger Jewish population within Europe, especially, unsurprisingly, in Poland. There is never a British Palestine, and never even Hitler, so the Holocaust never forces Jews to flee to a new land. Could fascism still rise? Possibly, but obviously not in the manner of our timeline. It would be harder, having to rise in countries with histories of democracy. As a whole, we see...
Man, what if Hitler rises? I mean, I don't know how that happens. World War I and all that happened after that, how Germany was punished, created the environment where Hitler can rise up, Nazis can rise up. In this, that wouldn't have been the case since Germany would have been the powerhouse. But what if Hitler somehow does rise up because he is that smart? He's Hitler. He's that cruel and effed up. I guess he would have found a way to rise up. What if he does and now he has this kind of powerful Germany? What if in this alternate timeline, Hitler does take over the world because he starts with that powerful Germany? Oh, that's just effed up, isn't it? Damn. I don't know how that happened because he played on people's fear and insecurities because Germany was punished that much, and from there he built up. I don't know how he would have done from this, but I guess he still would have jumped rank just to become something, I guess, because he had the ambition like that in his head. I don't know.
A Western civilization far more socially conservative than our own. Without World War II, which created such a societal shift, generations don't become disinterested in the old order. Imperial might, empire, and colonies remain a desire because that was Germany's main prize for victory. Britain and France want their colonies back. America wants to be like Germany. Speaking of which, what is America doing? They never got involved in the war, and so the American public is largely neutral to a German victory. Of course, being culturally and economically closer to Britain meant that while the Allied loss was an issue, it wasn't catastrophic. What's done is done, and to the Americans, relationships had to be made with the victors and to mend ties. Being uninvolved in the war, the United States tries to reach across the aisle. It's not a global military leader, but economically it's strong. If the German economic plans worked, then they'd be a valuable partner. The millions of German immigrants across the Midwest don't have to abandon their heritage so quickly. In our timeline, the reason Germans assimilated so quickly was because of anti-German sentiment once America became involved in the war. They were discriminated and hated, abandoning their culture to fit in. Without a war, many can continue to speak their native language, even entire isolated towns in the Midwest. As a result, the United States has a far greater Germanic influence mixed in with its English population. Throughout the 20th century, this influences financial and diplomatic relationships with the new power across the Atlantic. Because so much would be shifted by this victory, I can't account for exact specifics going into the rest of the 20th century. Any event could randomly change the course of history, even if Germany did win. The Great Depression certainly causes upheaval for countries across the world. But as a whole, simply following the events of our own timeline, Whoever won the Great War forever shaped the 20th century in their image.
Yeah.
Had Germany won, it has an immediate head start on this new age. Its Prussian influence, its economic might, and huge population means that the 20th century easily could have been the German century. This new era could look very similar to the old one. As European empires still fight for land, mentalities remain the same, at least for a little while longer. Even if the Kaiser eventually fell out of favor, Germany still benefits from this war, even if its allies did not. And perhaps German as a culture is far more influential across the world, spreading 3 entire continents. Of course, this is simply one scenario, an exercise of alternate history. But it's fun to theorize. This is Cody of Alternate History Hub.
Yeah. I think, World War I wouldn't have been the only great war if Germany won. I just thought of that because Germany would have been state powerhouse. Britain would have had to give up lots of colonies, but since US being so close to culturally Britain, I guess Britain would have found a way to become powerhouse again at certain level. France would have, I guess, not as like it was, but I guess France would have been somewhat good enough too. After a certain wait of few decades where everybody can catch their, breath basically, I think there would have been a big war again. Russia would have been bitter against Germany because they would have to give up lots of places. So Russia, France, Britain would have gone against Germany again with all the Germany's German countries and everything. US, I think, would have stayed neutral again, or maybe side with Britain or something. I don't know. I think there would have been more wars. It would become a thing like it was before in Europe. There wars are every few decades here and there until somebody thinks, okay, I'll make atomic bomb. Because then people will start to get atomic bombs, and just like today, everybody would chill out with major wars. So yeah, I think that would happen. But the idea is, one thing I'm thinking here, that as year progresses and people's thinking progresses, as the science progresses, people's minds start to, become more freer. People start to think that I like to be free than be under any monarch or king. So if Germany still stays monarchy type of thing, or like how China is today, where certain people, certain government people dictates everything, I don't know. People have been still attracted to US and everywhere where there is free world with free ideas and laws. And slowly USA would have rose up, and try to overtake Germany or something. Or Germany would have start to decline somewhat. All the great minds would go elsewhere just because of the freedom or whatever. I don't know. I feel like US still would have rose up, not as it is today right now, but would have been close to Germany. Germany wouldn't have been what it is today. It would be somewhat of powerhouse still. There would have been still monarchy in place at some level. But yeah. And wars would still be going on in Europe until somebody develops atomic bomb, like I said. So yeah. Alright, that was What If Germany Won World War II Part 2, and that I guess finishes the series. This is a fun experiment, but I think the experiment branches out a lot that you can't really say it. But I guess, yeah, Germany would have dominated most of 20th century. Some of our thinking would be like, oh, Germany here and there. Some of our culture would have more German things in it. But yeah, US would still be culturally widespread, because culture, art, Hollywood and things like that would still be US's thing, since it's a free world. So yeah, I don't know. Alright people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction, there's a link in the description. Check out the cast, please check out the end cards, and I'll see you next time.